Okay, welcome back, everyone. Hope you got a chance to go outside or do some exercise. Our session today, right now, we're going to be looking into breathwork and pranayama for effective meditation practice with Bryan Crigler. Bryan began studying Kriya Yoga in 2015, and if I recall correctly, he began the apprenticeship program somewhere around 2021. He's a hatha yoga teacher, trained in meditation, pranayama, as well as an advanced oxygen advantage instructor. And as I mentioned earlier, he did a great job presenting in our September retreat, and I think you're really going to enjoy the ideas and principles he has to share today. So I'll just go ahead and turn it over to him. Thank you. Yeah, there you go.
Thanks, Ryan. Am I good? Yeah. Great. I appreciate it. Excited to be here. Yeah, as Ryan said, I've been training in Kriya for quite some time. I found it the way that many of us do through Autobiography of a Yogi. That's where I found Kriya Yoga. And that was about 2014, 2015. Yeah, I did some self-realization fellowship. And then got away from that, got into some other modalities and went down a deep rabbit hole of pranayama and breathwork too. So I studied with yogic lineages, more traditional stuff, and then also sports medicine related, as Ryan mentioned, the oxygen advantage with Patrick McEwen. And for me, what I found was marrying those two things together, science-based physical breath with pranayama practices was very beneficial, especially when it came to developing things like pranic sensitivity, which we'll talk to a bit here. Found Ryan back in 2019, got into the apprenticeship program eventually, and here we are. So I'm excited to be here. This has been an awesome retreat. I really love the making samadhi accessible and practical for people because there's so much mysticism and mystery around it, and a lot of people feel it's inaccessible, and that's just simply not true. So I really appreciate this retreat, and hopefully this can add to it. The breath is an incredible tool that we have. We have such an intimate connection with the breath. It is of the autonomic functions of the body, our heart beats, our digestive system works, and we breathe, right? We don't have to think about those things. But of all those systems, the respiratory system, the breath, is the one that anybody at any point can immediately impact. Eventually, maybe you can learn to manipulate your heart rate with your mind. That's happened. But it's hard for a lot of people. But any of us can stop breathing immediately and affect our breath. So this makes it a very powerful tool. Or it makes it so that we can get into trouble if we have a very unhealthy respiratory system. We can change our state of mind, our mood, our emotions with the breath, and vice versa. So, for example, if you're in a very anxious state of mind, chances are you're breathing a certain way. Your breath is probably a little bit more shallow, maybe quicker. And also, if you breathe in a certain way, you can put yourself into an anxious state, or you can calm yourself down and get out of that state. So is a very useful tool for us. And there's two big components of the breath that we want to talk about. The first is the physical, and we'll get into that in great detail. And the second then, of course, is the pranic aspect. This is our energetic aspect, pranayama, right? So pranayama can translate to the expansion of, or even control of, prana, this energy within the body, this life force within the body. And the breath is a really powerful bridge between those two. And I don't think it's an accident that so many different lineages and traditions use techniques that are focused around the breath for meditation techniques. And there's a few reasons for that. First of all, we don't have to think about the breath. It keeps going, so we don't have to keep chanting a mantra. The breath just keeps breathing, so you can yoke your awareness to that, and that's useful. But I think the other thing, and maybe what's relevant for us as Kriya Yogis, is that we can use the physical to bridge into the subtle. Because what we're trying to do is to get into more and more subtle states, right? We're trying to have a very real experience beyond imagination of subtle states within the body and tapping into these different sheaths that we hear about. So we'll talk a little bit about how to do that, hopefully in a practical way. I want to start with the physical though, okay? As we said, we can alter all sorts of things with the breath. We can do it quickly. So by changing the way we're breathing, getting out of an anxious state, for example. Or we can do more long-term adjustments with the breath. And this would be along the lines of, say, changing the efficiency of oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange in the body, which, believe it or not, for us as meditators is actually useful. And one of the easy way to gain a metric of that is to do a breath hold. I was thinking about making us all hold our breath for a minute, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to assume that you all have held your breath at some point in time, and you've probably timed it, whether you're a kid at the pool or whatever. I'm going to guess pretty much everybody here can hold their breath for a minute and a half, unless you've really trained something, right? My personal record is about 5 minutes. So that's with no air in my lungs. So no air in my lungs, I can hold my breath for about 5 minutes, maybe a little longer with a full breath of air. The world record, as of now, is 30 minutes, half an hour, okay? Breath hold, face in water. Now, granted, that individual probably did some prep work with breathing a more purified form of oxygen, probably doing some controlled hyperventilation to prepare for it. But 30 minutes is incredible, right? And if you get into the freediving community and work with people that do this a lot, it's very normal for them to do 10, 15 minutes holding their breath, okay? So the point of that is that we can change the way that our respiratory system functions. We can make it more efficient. We're not just, this is what we got because we're born with it. We can make it better. It can also get worse over time if we have improper or unhealthy breathing habits. So I want to talk about that from a physical perspective because it's useful for all of us. We can also quickly change our heart rate. We can change our blood pressure. So if you struggle with blood pressure, it's useful to know. And for us as meditators, we can regulate the nervous system, okay? And this is really important for us to be able to get into calm states of mind and to experience prana. Ryan mentioned earlier this idea of pranic sensitivity. If we're a big ball of tension, we're probably going to have a lot more difficult time experiencing some real experience of prana. So we want to be able to relax into the body, and breath can help us do that, certainly. Let's do a really quick overview of the anatomy of the respiratory system because we're going to do guided meditation at the end of this, and I want you to have a really solid visual of the different parts of the body. So I'm just going to briefly go over it. The first point of entry is the nose. Very important that we're breathing through the nose, okay? There's tons and tons of science around this. If you look at how complicated the nasal cavity is for our respiratory system versus the mouth, it's very clear that we are meant as a species to breathe through the nose, okay? 100%. It's useful that we can breathe through the mouth because if you've got a real stuffy nose or if you get your nose broken or something like that, we want to be able to breathe. And you might notice me breathing through the mouth as I'm talking because otherwise, every couple of seconds when I had to take an inhale, I would have to have these awkward pauses, right? So it's useful for me to be able to breathe quickly into my mouth. So I'm not saying it's bad, but as a general rule, we don't want to breathe through the mouth. We want to breathe through the nose. So when the breath comes in, we've got all these things that are happening. We've got a bunch of hairs in our nose. As we get older, sometimes we get more longer hairs in our nose, right? But this is trapping materials, trapping particles. That's our first line of defense. There's also tiny little hairs in there that get smaller stuff. You also notice that there's smaller holes, smaller openings, and then there's a long cavity here. And the reason for that is we're slowing it down. So we're slowing the air down so we can get properly conditioned. Once we come from the nostrils, we hit the inner cavity of the nose. And this is where a lot of people don't understand the physiology. So if you were to slice my front of my face off, you would see these three kind of J-shaped curves. It's like if you cut a cone seashell in half, you'd see these three J-shaped curves. These are called turbinates. These are really important, and they're J-shaped because they make the air kind of swirl as you breathe. And the reason for that is to further slow it, to help condition it. So when we breathe through the nose, we're getting more moisture added to the air, and we're warming it. We're warming it up. When we just breathe into the mouth, yes, the mouth is moist, but we're not getting a whole lot of moisture into the air. We're not warming it. So we're getting cold, dry air into the lungs, and the body doesn't like that. So it's important we want to breathe that way. In fact, the turbinates also have, we'll talk more about this a little later, they also have erectile tissue. They're one of three parts of our body that has actual erectile tissue, which is why you'll notice the change in how one nostril is more open than another. We'll get into a little more detail on that later. Sinus is the same thing. We're slowing the air down. We're warming it. We're making it humid. In addition, as Ryan mentioned earlier today, the paranasal sinuses is where our body produces the majority of nitric oxide that we have in our body. You may have heard of nitric oxide. It's a vasodilator, so it opens up the bloodstream, which is why it's the main ingredient, I think, in Viagra. It opens up the blood. It's also a bronchodilator, so it opens up the respiratory system. It's a very important molecule for our body, and most of it is made in the sinuses. And funny enough, when we hum, we get 15 to 20 times the production of nitric oxide in our sinuses, which is incredible. So even when we are Om chanting or chanting Bija mantras or doing Mari or just humming, we're creating a ton of nitric oxide. So it's really important then at the end of that to breathe in back through your nose. So you're getting all that great nitric oxide into your system. So try to always breathe back in through the nose when you do any sort of chanting. It's very useful. Okay. The air goes down into the throat. We have all seen the pictures of the bronchioles and the bronchioles, like the upside down trees that go into our lungs. At the very end of all of those are these tiny little single cell sacs called alveoli. And those are surrounded by single cell capillaries, which is part of our circulatory system. And every time we breathe in, the alveoli release oxygen and gases into the capillaries, which take them out into the bloodstream. And then when we breathe out, the opposite happens. They're giving carbon dioxide back, and we breathe it out. So this is an incredible thing that happens every time we breathe. What an amazing design this creation is, that something like that happens with every breath. It blows my mind. But that gets into the bloodstream, and this becomes important because this is where we can start to change our breathing habits and how efficient our respiratory system is, okay? Because once it goes into the bloodstream, oxygen is picked up by hemoglobin. I'm taking you back to high school biology. It's picked up by hemoglobin, okay? And then hemoglobin takes that oxygen to the muscles and the organs that need it, and it ideally releases it. It's not a lack of oxygen, though, that causes the hemoglobin to release. It is your body's tolerance to carbon dioxide. So when the body senses a certain level of carbon dioxide, the hemoglobin releases a certain level of oxygen into the muscles and things that need it. And so this is why athletes like runners, fighters, they go up to high altitude into the mountains to train. You probably heard of this, right? They do that because there's less oxygen up there. Their body gets used to higher levels of carbon dioxide. And here's where the magic happens. It changes. It changes the efficiency. And then when they go back down to regular altitude, they have an edge over their competitors because their body is more efficient. The good news is you don't have to go to the mountains to do that. You can do it by long breath holds and stuff like that. So we're not going to get super deep into that because I want to keep this focused on how do we meditate better? How do we use this stuff for more efficient meditation? But believe it or not, that can make a difference. That can make a difference, and we'll talk about that. Okay, and then the muscles for breathing, right? We have these intercostals in our ribs that help expand our rib cage. But probably the more important muscle for our concern is the diaphragm. And so the diaphragm is this conical shaped muscle here. It sits up under the ribs. Every time you take a breath in, it flattens and presses down, because remember, your organs are sitting up in here. When you breathe in, it presses down, it presses your organs down. When you exhale, it relaxes back up. So with every breath, not only are you bringing oxygen in the body, but you're massaging the organs. You're helping with digestion. You're getting blood flow down to those organs. And so if you are breathing into the chest and not utilizing the diaphragm, you're missing that thing that's supposed to happen every time you breathe. Okay. So obviously there's a lot of great benefits and reasons that we want to have a good, solid, healthy respiratory system, better digestion, better sleep, better energy, less breathlessness, etc. But as meditators, a slower and more subtle breath can help us get into deeper states. You'll notice, and if you haven't noticed, start paying attention, that as you're meditating, as you get into deeper and deeper states towards the end of your meditation, your breath is probably very subtle. It's probably much more subtle than when you started, okay? And you may have even experienced what's called the breathless state, where you suddenly realize you're not breathing at all. It's very common very common for us as we get into deeper states for this to happen. But if you have a very unhealthy respiratory system, what you likely will find is that you're not able to sustain that as long, that your body is going to object to the fact that you have a higher level of carbon dioxide, and it's going to bring you back and tell you need to breathe more. Or if you do enter that breathless state, you might have some panic that comes along with that because your body's freaking out a little bit. So if you can develop a healthier respiratory system, I think it can allow you to reach these states and stay in them more comfortably for a longer period of time. So it is worth your time as a meditator to also pay attention to this. It's not just for athletes. Okay, so let's talk about some ways that we can actually manipulate our physiology with our breath in the short term, okay? And mostly I want to focus around kind of ways to help calm the nervous system. So this would be like before meditation. Let's say you've had a busy day at work, or you've woken up with a lot of anxiety or something like that. How do we quickly calm our system down so that it doesn't get in the way of our meditation practice? That's really what I want to focus on. Let's see if this shows up on the camera. I'm not sure if it'll work or not. Okay, so this little device on my finger here, this is called a pulse oximeter. So the big number that you see, which is backwards, probably hard to read, the big number is my oxygen levels in my blood, my SpO2 level, okay? And the little number that you see is the heart rate. And so every time I breathe in, that number is going to increase every single time I breathe in. Every time I breathe out, that number goes down, okay? So whenever I inhale, my heart rate increases, and whenever I exhale, my heart rate decreases. Every breath. You can pick, these are fun to play with. You can pick one of these up at any drugstore. They're probably like $15-20. And you can mess around with your oxygen levels and your heart rate. You can watch this happen. So what do we do with that information? If we know that every time we exhale, our heart rate goes down, we can start to lower our base heart rate by elongating our exhale. And so this is the reason that we hear that we're supposed to double the exhale, for example. And this is a really quick and easy way to do it. So let's try it together. We're going to start counting the breath, okay? So let's just use inhale for 4, and we're going to exhale for 8. So let's breathe in for 4, and exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good. And insert your number that's comfortable for you. So you don't want to be gasping for breath at the end of this. So if 8 was too long, go for 3 and 6. If 8 was easy, start to ramp that up, go for 5 and 10, whatever's comfy. This number will change for you over time. The important thing is that you're doubling the amount of time that you exhale. And this will very quickly start to calm things down based on that science of the heart rate decreases every time that you exhale, okay? Another very useful and quick trick that we can use is not a yogic technique. It's called the physiological sigh, though. And this was something that came out of UCLA, and Stanford Labs did a lot of work on this as well. It's called the physiological sigh. And it's very simple. Basically, we breathe through the nose. We take a full breath in. And then when we have full lungs, we take a extra little sip of air, like you're getting a little extra in that balloon. And then we can, this is one of the situations we can use our mouth. We do an audible sigh and make it long, like a very easy. So let's try a couple of those together. So we're going to breathe in fully, a little extra sip, and then I already feel better. Do it again. Breathe in fully, extra sip. One more time. Breathe in fully, extra sip. So in labs, in those two labs, UCLA and Stanford, they tested this against a number of different breathing techniques, and they found from all of their markers that this was the fastest way to lower the stress levels, to pull you out of fight or flight. So if you've got a big speech coming up, or you just had a difficult conversation, or for us, right before you sit down on your meditation cushion to get the rest of the day off, do 4 or 5 of these before you go into your practices, and it can really help settle everything down. Okay, and then the last kind of tool I want to show you here is a yogic pranayama. It's called samavriti. It's also called breath of equal holds. It's been called box breathing. It's been called square breathing. Some of you may be familiar with this. It's a very effective technique, and it's been adopted by a lot of other organizations. I believe the Navy SEALs teachers are taught this to soldiers because it is a way that you can calm the nervous system, calm the nerves without getting drowsy. Okay, so it's a really useful tool. And it's called breath of equal holds. It's just like it sounds. You're going to breathe in for a certain count. You're going to hold your breath for that count. You're going to exhale for the same count. And now with no air in the lungs, you're going to hold your breath for that count. So it's a box breathing, just like that. Let's try a couple rounds. We'll just do a count of 4 just to keep it easy. Breathing through the nose. So we'll breathe in for a count of 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold the breath. 3, 2, 1. Exhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold the breath. 4, 3, 2. Again, breathe in. 4. Hold. Exhale. And hold. Good. And you can keep doing this over and over again. No one's going to know that you're doing it for the most part, so you can do this throughout the day. The other interesting thing that will happen when you do this, let's say you work your way up to 10 seconds, right? That's 40 full seconds. So what you've done is you've taken your breath to 1 breath every 40 seconds. Generally, our normal respiratory rate is somewhere between 15 and 20 breaths a minute. But now you've significantly lowered that to about 1.5 breaths a minute, okay? And this is going to start training your body to accept higher levels of carbon dioxide. And you can increase that number over time. So if you start with 4, do that for a week. The next week, go to 5 or 6. Keep working up to your comfort level. It's very useful. Really effective tool in traffic, I've found. Help keep you alert and awake and calm. You can do this box breathing. You never want to obviously go to the point where you're feeling lightheaded or anything like that, but if you keep it gentle, it's a very useful tool. So that's samavriti. So those 3 tools can be really good preparation practice to very quickly calm the nervous system. I also want to talk a little bit about nasal dominance. We're not going to go into nadi shodhana, into alternate nostril breathing, because Ryan explained that, and we've done that practice a few times. But I do want to talk a little bit about nasal dominance, or what's called swara, okay? And there's a whole science, yogic science around swara, which has to do with which nostril is more open. So you can test it right now. Probably one nostril is going to be more clear than the other. This is totally normal. Very rarely at different points in the day, both nostrils are equally open. But for the most part, you're always going to have one that's slightly more open than another. Okay. In yoga, it's called swara. There's a whole science where you can live your whole life based on only doing activities that are recommended based on which nostril is open. Right? You can get really deep into it. It's also known as nasal dominance in modern science circles. So it's a very well looked at and researched phenomenon. And what's happening is, we mentioned those turbinates have erectile tissue in them. And what's happening is one is swelling up. Simple as that. So we can alter that, which is really interesting. There's a few ways you can alter it. If you're a side sleeper, you probably notice if you're laying on your left side, your right nostril opens. If you're laying on your right side, your left nostril opens. Okay. Part of that is gravity. Everything's settling to one side. Part of it is that. The other part is there's actually kind of pressure point in your armpit that affects, believe it or not, the opposite side nostril. So if you've seen some old yogic manuscripts, you may have come across what's called a danda stick. It looks like a short little crutch that a yogi will stick under their armpit as they sit in their meditation posture. The reason they're using that danda stick is because it puts that pressure up under the armpit and it opens the opposite nostril. So what they're really doing is trying to manipulate and ideally having both nostrils fairly easily open. I don't know where you find a danda stick, so I don't necessarily use that methodology. I've also found one that's a lot more accessible. And this is actually something I learned through Oxygen Advantage. It's called the nose unblocking technique. It's a very scientific, fancy name. And it does just what it sounds like. So I find if I wake up in the morning and one of my nostrils is especially blocked, it can make my nadi shodhana more difficult because it's hard to tune into the real subtle if you're struggling to get the physical moving. It's been my experience, okay? So one thing that we can do, because these turbinates have erectile tissue, they can pretty easily be manipulated. And so this technique looks like this. You're breathing out of all the air out of your lungs. For this technique, we're pinching the nose so we don't allow any air to seep in. And then we're just moving around. Since we're sitting here watching this video, we can just move our torso around, maybe shaking our head forward and backward. If you're at home, you can walk back and forth around the room or something like that. It's also very effective. But we want to get some movement going because we want to get our carbon dioxide levels higher. Okay. And we're going to go to a point of pretty strong air hunger. Like you're trying to hold your breath longer and it feels intense. And then when you breathe in, rather than gasping through your mouth, try to take a slow, controlled breath in through the nose. Okay. Now, sometimes this will work right away on the first try. You'll notice a difference. Sometimes it takes 1, 2, even 3 times, but eventually it certainly will work. And most of you will probably notice it right away. So again, check in. See how clear the nose is. Notice which side is open. Okay. And then breathe out the nose till there's no air in. Pinch the nose. And then just start finding some movement here. Just move back and forth, sway the body a little bit, even just nodding the head up and down until you're feeling a real strong air hunger. We're all doing it, so you don't have to worry about looking silly. Real strong air hunger. And then try to control the inhale as you breathe in through the nose. And try to take a nice slow breath in and let everything settle down. And then just notice. Sometimes right away the things will open up and you can notice a difference. Good. Looks like some of you that's the case. Awesome. If you didn't get it right away, don't worry. Again, you can try this 2, 3 times. It will certainly eventually open. And what's happening is you're increasing the carbon dioxide and your body is saying, uh-oh, we need to open up the airways. And so it is getting that blood out of the turbinates so that the air will flow better. And I find this is really effective if I sit down for Nadi Shodhana to help clear everything up. So there's another tool for you. Okay. So this is all preparatory, right? All these things are before we're sitting down or right when we sit down for meditation, before we get into our techniques. Preparatory practices, calming the nervous system, opening the airways. But now when we sit in meditation, we want to have proper breathing dynamics as well. I think I've been pretty clear that we want to breathe through the nose. So that's important. There are certain pranayama practices where it does call for breathing through the mouth, but as a general rule, we're breathing through the nose. Okay. We want to utilize the diaphragm. So not chest breathing. This is common to have poor posture, chest breathing, instead of good posture, diaphragmatic breathing. Those two things go hand in hand. Also, mouth breathing, poor posture, chest breathing, they are a downward spiral. They reinforce each other. And the opposite is also true. So shoulders back, breathing through the nose, breathing through the diaphragm. Everything has more room when we're breathing this way. And we'll do an exercise in a moment to show you how to access that diaphragm. The other thing that we want to consider is the breath should be smooth, so not shaky. It should be easy. It shouldn't take effort. And it should be quiet. So unless we're doing something like ujjayi breathing, that's going to cause us to make a noise, our breath should be pretty silent and subtle. So that's what we want to work towards. In fact, the Yoga Sutras talk about this as well. In Sutra 31 of the first pada, it talks about shvasa prashvasa, which is basically erratic inhale and exhale as being a symptom of the antaraya, of the kind of distractions that come up. So it's very clear. Calm, smooth, easy breath is what we want to do. Let's talk about how to access the diaphragm. If we were sitting in a room together, I would show you a few different ways. We can utilize sandbags. We can utilize makarasana or crocodile pose for you hatha yogis. It's a great way to connect with the diaphragm. But since we're sitting, let's do this. We're gonna take our hands here, and your thumbs should go So we're going just under the ribs where the soft part of the body begins. Your thumb should actually be almost touching your back. So reach around. You're trying to hug your sides a little bit. And then your fingers should be towards your belly. Okay, so you're squeezing your body this way under your ribs, so where the body gets soft. We want to have good posture while we're doing this. We want to breathe through the nose. Now, if I breathe into my chest and try to push in a little bit, not too much, but push in a little bit with your hands so you've got some pressure. Okay, now try this. Now breathe only into your chest. You're probably feeling a little bit of movement in the hands because there's some expansion, but probably not that much, okay? What I want you to do now is to breathe down towards the belly in a way that your thumbs press back and your fingers press forward and your whole hands go out a little bit. So remember, you're pushing into your sides. Breathe in a way that causes this to open and press out. Like you're trying to push your hands away from your body with your breath. And if you're breathing properly, you should feel this in your thumbs, in your fingers, in the webs of your hands. Remember, you're giving it some gentle pushing in against it, so give it something to push against. Now, if you're feeling that movement, you're accessing the diaphragm, okay? And you can work with this practice daily, whether it's this or sandbag breathing or something like that, because what happens is it forms a sanskara, right? It forms a groove. And the more that you practice this, the body remembers, it will just naturally be how you breathe. And that's what we want. We want this to be your normal breathe. So you don't have to think about it, right? You don't have to think about this while you're meditating. You just want this to normally happen. So work with this type of breathing every day. It's also a really nice way, honestly, to calm down before bed or after work or something like that. So you can work this into your daily exercise. Okay, so that's the physical, or at least all the physical we're going to cover today. But now let's get into pranic, right? Because that's what we're really after here, is how do we connect more with prana as Kriya yogis? How can we have a deeper experience of that? This is the life force. This is that which animates all of it. And there's this cosmic prana that is permeating everything. And then there's also our individual prana, right? And this is where the pranic body comes in. The nadis, the chakras, right? So let's talk about the pranic body and what that actually means, because it's a useful roadmap. As you get into certain experiences, you'll be able to have direct experience of some of these things. We know nadi shodhana, right? Nadi shodhana has to do with nadis. These are just the energetic pathways through the body. In yoga, we call them nadis. In other traditions, they're called other things. Meridians, for example, in Chinese medicine. I believe they're the same thing. It's the same energy. It's moving through the same channels. They have actually found in yoga, some texts talk about 72,000 nadis. Some texts talk about 300 or 350,000 nadis. I've never even counted to 72,000. So I can't imagine mapping out 72,000 subtle energy pathways in the body, but some amazing group of yogis did that somewhere along the way. Okay. For our purposes in Kriya Yoga, there's three very important ones that we spend a lot of time with. We've talked about Sushumna. So this runs from the root up to the crown, the central channel of the body along the spine. And then we've got Ida, which runs from the left and kind of crisscrosses the spine and ends on the left. And we've got Pingala, which starts on the right and crisscrosses the spine and ends on the right. And everywhere these cross each other is a chakra, right? So there are many chakras. There's, I think, 114 last time I checked. We talk about 7 very important ones. And the nadis cross at 6 of them. So the crown is not where a nadi crosses, but everywhere else they cross is one of the chakras that we work with. And we've talked a lot about chakras during this retreat, but it is an energetic flow in the body and one that we can experience. So that's the important thing to remember. It's also useful, I think, to understand and mention the pancha prana, the vayus, right? These pathways and movements of prana in the body, because you may come across them and have an experience of it. So we've got prana vayu or stula here in the chest region. It kind of flows upward. We've got a pana, which runs from basically the navel down, and this is our elimination, right? It gets things out of the body. Samana is right in the navel, it has a side movement. Udana deals with the extremities. It also deals with the neck upwards. And so if you've had experiences, and many of you may have in meditation, where you feel this kind of weightlessness from the shoulders up, it's possible that you're tapping into experiencing Udana, right? This is the flow of Udana. And then Vyana kind of permeates through the whole body. So the reason that we're told in yoga and different practices, in Kriya and different practices, not to do specific techniques when we are very ill, mentally agitated, pregnant, menstruating, etc., is because there's this natural intelligence of the body through the vayus, right? This energy is moving. We don't have to think about it. Thankfully, it's moving in a way that it's supposed to for things to function properly. And when we do certain techniques, we are, in a sense, changing that flow. We are intentionally manipulating some of that prana. And if we have some of those situations going on, we don't want to interrupt that flow of prana. We want the body to be able to heal and do its thing. So that's the reasoning for that, okay? And then the last thing to mention, I think, is the koshas. So we've got these different sheaths. We've got our physical body that we're made up of. This is our food kosha, our annamaya kosha. We've got pranamaya kosha, which is where we'll spend most of our time talking about today. This is where our vital life energy force. Manomaya, as we get into the mental thought energy. Vijnanamaya, which is the realm of buddhi. And then Anandamaya, which is our bliss sheath. So again, we're going to focus on pranamaya, but we have experiences of these things as we get into more and more subtle states. We're going from the gross to the subtle, right? And we want to conserve our prana for that. And prana can be affected by lots of things, right? It can be affected by the breath, as we've mentioned, the foods that you eat. If you studied Ayurveda, the pranic value of foods is something we talk about a lot. Our environment certainly can affect our prana, sleep schedule, sexual energy, stress and exertion, and yogic practices. That all can affect our prana. But basically by living a yogic lifestyle, by eating a sattvic diet, by practicing yamas and niyamas, doing our yogic practices, etc., we are cultivating prana and conserving prana. And this is important for us as yogis because we want to go from bhoga to apavarga, right? From expelling energy and towards the outward world of experience into internalizing things. Brahmacharya, instead of where are we spending our energy? We want our energy to come inward, and we want to utilize that energy for our spiritual pursuits, okay? So we can do this by developing and retaining prana, which is where a lot of those lifestyle suggestions become very important. But the breath is a way that we can start to do it. So let's talk about how to actually experience that. And we've done some of this stuff with Ryan this week already through body awareness. Just by anytime there's a sensation in the body, there's a signal through your nervous system. That's energy going through your system, right? There's heat, there's vibration. When we chant, right, there's a vibration that goes through the body. That's energy, that's prana. And so we can start to tune in that way. But the breath is also a really useful tool because we can start from the gross and go into the subtle. Basically, by yoking our awareness, we want to have deep concentration on the physical part of the breath, and it will help us experience the subtle part of that breath pretty naturally. When we're doing things like chanting through the chakras, when we're doing things like forcible arousal techniques, Sushumna breathing, Kriya Pranayama, we are putting our awareness on something, and then we are uniting our breath with that awareness, right? We can breathe up and down the spine. Not only are we sensing up and down the spine, but we're doing it in conjunction with our breath. Same thing, life force arousal technique, Kriya Pranayama, even chanting through the chakras. We're breathing in a certain area. When we chant Om or we chant a Bija mantra, we can send the breath and the vibration of that mantra to that area and really have a profound experience of that chakra through that yoking of the breath. So let's try a little exercise here. Ryan talked earlier about pointing your awareness at different parts of the body. He's asked you to feel this part, okay? So just like if you look at the back of your hand, you can sense the back of your hand. If you close your eyes, you can still sense it. I'm going to ask you to do that same thing, okay? But we're going to follow some parts of the breath here. So go ahead and close your eyes. For this exercise, we are going to breathe through the nose. So go ahead and let the breath settle. Make sure the diaphragm is the main activator. Relax your shoulders. And then just let the breath be easy. Don't worry about counting how long you're inhaling or exhaling or anything like that. And I want you to just bring all of your awareness to the very, very opening of your nostrils. So just feel everything you can outside, just outside the nostrils, just around the opening of the nostrils. And see what you can notice. And probably you can notice the movement of the air on the skin. You can probably notice a temperature. There's maybe a coolness as you breathe in. There's probably a little bit of a warmness as you breathe out. You may be able to notice moisture. So it may be drier coming in, maybe moisture coming out. Just notice what you can feel there. Be exploratory about it. Be a little scientific. Okay. Now let that go and allow your awareness to come a little higher up into the nostrils. So really high up towards the bridge of the nose, in between the eyes there, higher up in the nasal cavity. And notice what that feels like. Notice the movement, maybe temperature, maybe moisture. And now allow it to go just a little bit higher. So just up between the eyebrows here at the very top of the nose. Notice the movement there, any sensations there, or the qualities of your breath. And I'll go just a little bit higher, so just up towards the center of the forehead, just above the eyebrows. And really focus on the movement of the breath there and notice what you feel for breath there. And now follow that whole flow of breath from the opening of the nostrils through all those points up to the center of the forehead and then back down and out the nose. And so we're noticing opening, bridge of the nose, in between the eyebrows, center of the forehead, and then back out. Just notice the flow there. Good, then you can let the breath deepen and let the eyes open. And so what we did there was we went through a few different points. Were many people able to feel the breath up here towards the forehead? Yeah. We talked about our anatomy earlier, and the nasal cavity doesn't go up here. So there's no part of your physical breath that's coming up into your forehead. So if you're able to sense up here, what you were sensing is prana. Okay? You started focusing just on the physical, and somewhere along the lines, you tuned into the movement of prana through the physical. and then you're able to follow it to where the physical doesn't go, but you're still able to follow the movement of prana. This is what I mean by breath can be a bridge, right? Now, if you did not have that experience, don't worry about it. Don't beat yourself up. It doesn't matter. We can develop it, okay, over time. But I like to use that exercise to make that point, because it's a really easy way to start to understand how to tap into that level of prana. And again, every time you do that, there's a samskara that forms, there's a groove that forms, and it becomes easier for you to get back there. It's like working a muscle, okay? And we can apply that same thing to the chakras and to the different parts of the body as we get into different meditation activities. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is another practice, maybe a little longer one this time. And this is just a way for us to feel physically all of those different areas of the body that the breath affects, because really our whole body breathes when we breathe, okay? And so what I want to do is one place at a time, point your awareness, and just like we did really experiencing the opening of the nostrils in these different places, I want you to really get curious and experience how the breath affects these different parts of the body as I guide us through it, and just really try to keep your awareness on the one part that we're focused on throughout this exercise. And hopefully it'll give us a deeper connection with the breath, okay? So go ahead, get comfortable, get into a nice seat. Noticing the diaphragm again. And we'll start at the same place we did last time. Okay, so just bring your awareness back to the opening of the nostrils. You may even be able to sense outside the nostrils, outside the body. The prana does expand beyond our physical body. So notice how far out you can sense, and just notice the very start of the breath, right by the nostrils. And just mentally take note of all the qualities there, just like we just did. And then go up a little higher, up towards the bridge of the nose again, in between the eyes. Just notice how the breath feels there. And now this time we're going to follow the breath back into the nasal cavity. So behind the eyes, if you can imagine the turbinates and the sinuses, and just try to get a feeling, really try to follow the breath behind the eyes into the inside of the skull. Notice all the qualities there, maybe moisture, temperature, movement. And we'll continue that journey, and we'll notice the breath as it passes by the throat. So the back of the throat, and then also down towards the whole esophagus area. Just notice the movement of the breath there. What are the qualities? And then start to notice the shoulders, the collarbone. Even though we're breathing through the diaphragm, there's still a gentle movement that happens there. So right where the neck and the shoulders meet, just pay attention to any subtle movements there as you breathe in and breathe out. And notice how the ribs move a little lower towards the chest. You can sense the shoulder blades and notice how they move gently with each breath. And try to sense the lungs. See if you can notice the breath as it enters the lungs. Maybe you can feel a temperature or a movement there. A pressure. And then trying to sense the diaphragm at the bottom of the sternum, where the ribs meet the soft part of the body. Feeling that movement, feeling that pressure with every breath in, and the release with every breath out. And then notice the belly and the organs. And notice the pressure as you breathe in and how it affects the feeling behind your belly button and the low back. And you can sense a little lower and feel into the pelvic bowl and feel that same downward pressure in the pelvis with every breath and a gentle release with every exhale. And you can feel this pressure all the way down to the perineum, the pelvic floor and the perineum. And there's this dance that happens between the pelvic floor and the diaphragm with every breath. As you inhale, there's a gentle pressure down. As you exhale, there's a gentle release up. Feeling our way back up to the pelvis. Noticing the pressure behind the belly button, the movement of the organs, the expansion of the torso. Sensing the diaphragm. Feeling the movement of the ribs, the expansion in the back. And reconnecting with that flow of air in and out of the lungs and the temperature and the movement there. And sensing the movement of the air at the throat, in and out, up and down. And back behind the eyes, in the sinuses, in the nasal cavity. And sensing between the eyebrows, between the eyes, the bridge of the nose. And back where we started, the nostrils and beyond. Taking a few breaths there. Noticing. And now try to spread your awareness out so that you're sensing all of those points simultaneously. You're feeling the whole body breathe, expanding with every inhale. There's a pressure that pushes out all the way to the edge of your skin. And a release and a relaxation with every exhale. Notice your whole body moving together. And as you notice the pressure on your skin as you inhale, see if you can sense beyond your skin. If you can feel the body breathing beyond the limits of your skin. See if you can sense the prana expanding out in front of you, behind you, around you, mixing with the atmosphere with every breath in and every breath out. We could start to let the breath deepen here. Bring awareness back into the body. Sensing the heart, sensing the hands, sensing the soles of the feet. And we can conclude this practice with one round of Om together. Peace. Okay. So that's a really cool breath sensitivity practice that Ryan taught me a while back. And I find it's really useful to just have a deeper connection with the breath and the body, and eventually to sense prana in the body. It also helps, I think, with chanting to the chakras and connecting with those actual points in the body through the breath. So hopefully there's some good tools there. I'm happy to answer questions if people have them. Otherwise, we can do it Sunday too.
All right. Thank you, Brian. That was wonderful. I tried to make my hearts explode. I think it worked. If there are any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat box. And if not, we can't wait till, here's one. Neti pots, question mark. Good for nose/breathing. Is there too much?
Yeah, neti pots are great. That's one of the shat karmas. There's always stories that are out there to scare us by design. I have heard that you should be careful with the water that you use in neti pots. I don't know how much validity there is to that. There's always stories. It's always in Florida, but there's always stories about people that got some kind of parasite or something, but I don't worry about it. I do use filtered water. I do warm it up. You want it to be kind of room temperature, so you pour it on your hand. It's not hot, but it's not cold. And you want to get your salt solution right and make sure you have a good clean salt designed for neti. But yeah, no, they're great. Absolutely. I would recommend neti pot. You'll find that sometimes it's hard to get the water out of your sinuses, and you have to kind of hold your head to the side, hold your head upside down, hold your head back. It's really funny if you do neti and then you go to do like an asana, like a hatha yoga class or something, because you get in downward dog and water will just start coming out your nose. But yeah, totally. Yeah, mess around with it.
What's a good salt? I think I just use like kosher salt.
Oh, really? I actually buy a mineral salt designed for neti. You know,
Okay.
maybe I'm being sold something there that I don't need, but it feels good to me, and I feel good that it's clean. And
Yeah, maybe that explains my problems. Anyway, okay. So another question. Let's see. Can the breath go beyond the top of the head? I felt it. So any
absolutely.
question? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. So Sahasrara is not just on the top of the head, it's up here. And our pranic body doesn't end at our skin. In yoga, it's called Dvarashanta, which just means the end of the 12th. But another measurement these yogis did was they measured 12 finger widths outside of the body as the official place that the breath starts. Absolutely. Yeah, you can feel breath outside the body.
Okay. And what do you think of mouth taping during the night to prevent mouth breathing, especially for a mouth breather?
I do it pretty much every night. I highly recommend it. I meant to mention it actually. I like, as a blue tape you can use, but really any cloth or paper tape will work. And I just get a little teeny piece and I put it over my mouth. You can buy more expensive mouth tapes that are designed so it has a little hole in there so you can breathe through your mouth if you want to. But even if you're nose breathing all day long, you can't really control, at least at this level, what's happening at nighttime. And so I find that I get a much better night's sleep. If you're a back sleeper, especially, you want to do this. And none of us think we snore, but our partners might tell us differently. So mouth tape will help that as well. If you've never done it before, especially if you're a mouth breather at night, you may wake up in the middle of the night panicked. That certainly happened to me the first couple times I did it. Your body will get used to it. Just push through it. You're not going to die. You don't want to completely seal your whole mouth. I usually leave the ends of my mouth open so I can still breathe if I needed to. But also, your nasal passages will open. Your body has some fail switch on them that you're not going to die in your sleep.
And if you do, well, that's a good way to go.
I guess so. And don't sue me.
Yeah, very good point. Yes. All right. Have you related the prana to pranava? Would you describe the relationship if it's not too deep?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it goes to cosmic prana. The pranava is the om, right? Is everything. It's in everything. And yeah, I think when I'm listening to, I'm not just listening to it, but I'm feeling it. There's a sensation that comes with it, vibratory, whatever. To me, it's a sensation of prana of some kind. So I think so. What do you think, Ryan? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a good enough answer for the time that we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, good. And another question, and if you have other questions, we've got a few more minutes here. You can put them in the chat box. But the last one I see right now is I feel that my breath is really shallow and that I don't have much air when chanting Om. Will working on holding breath longer and these breathing techniques help develop that?
Yes. Yeah, I think it would. Yeah. I think anytime that we can, the way that we develop our breathing efficiency typically is through air hunger. Right? It's through cultivating air hunger, which means we're getting more carbon dioxide in our body. When we do big breathing exercises, like if anyone's ever gotten into Wim Hof breathing, things like that, going back to this little pulse oximeter, if I were to wear this pulse oximeter when I'm doing like a big open mouth breathing, hyperventilation type of session, the big number, the oxygen number, doesn't change much. It might be 95. I might go up to 99 doing that, but I'm not getting a whole lot more oxygen in my body. What I'm doing is I'm scrubbing the body of carbon dioxide. So I'm getting rid of a lot of carbon dioxide, which is why you can do longer breath holds after that, because your body doesn't have that trigger to breathe. Okay. And so what we want to do when we're trying to increase our efficiency is to have more carbon dioxide. So we want to do the opposite of that. We want to do things like even this exercise that I showed you, by holding the breath and just pacing back and forth in the room like that, you can start counting your paces, right? So you can start by, I don't know, maybe 20 paces, maybe not even, maybe 15. Find your baseline number to where you really need to take a breath. And then every day, work to do that a little bit more, maybe one pace more. And what's going to happen is your body will very quickly adjust and adapt, and you will be able to probably om longer or have just better breathing in general. It is something that you can train.
Yeah, I wonder if you have any thoughts on diet. For example, I've noticed that when I've done those breathing exercises where you hold your breath out for a long period of time, if I'm eating really lightly or even if I'm fasting, I can hold my breath for a long time. I got up, not 5 minutes, but I got up close to 3, 4 minutes when I was eating a lot less. So I'm curious if you've noticed anything related to that.
I don't know the science on it, but I have noticed. So most of these practices we recommend you don't do on a full stomach. But that's part of the reason why is you're a little distended. You remember, like I said, the diaphragm's pushing down on all of you felt that pressure when we were doing that breathing, right? So if your belly's full of food, there's just not going to be as much room for the tidal volume in your lungs probably. But I don't know the science on it, but yeah, I think it would make a big difference. If you eat a whole pizza, you're going to breathe differently than you eat a salad, right?
That's true. Yes, that's right. Another question. Do you tape the mouth horizontally or vertically?
So I do a little like Charlie Chaplin size mustache piece of tape, and I do it this way, horizontally, right? Yeah, this way. It doesn't really matter though. You just want to keep the mouth from opening as the jaw relaxes, and you'll have to do a little bit of experimentation. Just a tiny little piece might be enough to do that. If you're a really predominant mouth breather, you might find that you still somehow end up breathing out the sides of your lips, where you just wake up and be like, my partner will laugh at me sometimes because when I'm falling asleep, I'll go through the mouth tape. So for me, then I sometimes will do it a little further out. So you just have to experiment with it.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm assuming it's doing the same thing. One thing that I would do, because I've done the mouth tape as well, is sometimes I would just get a pillow and just like to keep my jaw shut. So I
Yeah,
put the pillow on my chest and not so it's not jammed up there, but enough to where it just I can't open my jaw. And I found that helped sometimes too.
absolutely. Yeah, I've done that as well. Yeah, it's a good trick.
And another question, do you approve of using Reiki to open the nostrils? I also am accustomed to feeling prana when using Reiki.
I guess I haven't had any experience with Reiki in specific regards to opening the nostrils. So I'm not sure. If it works for you, give it a try. But I haven't had any experience with that personally, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think really even just experimenting with bringing just awareness to the nostrils, that has a capacity to open them up. I've noticed that there are techniques where you don't do alternate nostril breathing, you just feel the experience. And sometimes just holding the awareness in that space, I've noticed tends to open up the nostrils as well. Maybe that's the Reiki or the prana going where it needs to go.
Absolutely. Could be.
Good. All right. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us on this, Bryan. I think it's extremely helpful. I look forward to whatever course or class we come up with to help people integrate this into their practice, because as you know, it can really transform what you're doing with your practice. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. That reminds me. Is it okay if I recommend a couple of books for people
Sure.
to check out? Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the course I'm excited about. I think that will be an awesome resource. But in the meantime, there's a couple of books I might recommend. This one's a good one. It's called Breath by James Nestor. Some of you may have heard of this one. This is a pretty baseline book, but it's very easy to read. And it gets into a lot of what we talked about and some access to the science behind it. If you're interested more in changing the efficiency of oxygen in the body, we mentioned Oxygen Advantage. There's a couple books that Patrick has written. One's called The Oxygen Advantage. That's a good one. His more recent book is called The Breathing Cure, which basically has the oxygen advantage in it, plus a bunch of specific remedies. He talks about everything in here from COVID to asthma and everything in between, and different actual breathing exercises you can do to help remedy some of those things. So I recommend this book. And then for you yogis who are really interested in more traditional pranayama, there's an author that we've studied some other books by called Swami Niranjanananda Saraswati. And Swami Niranjanananda is from the Bihar School of Yoga, but he's got this book called Prana and Pranayama. And this is a wonderful book about the energetic body, nadis, chakras, koshas, the vayus, as well as a number of traditional pranayama exercises. So that's a good place to start.
All right, fantastic. And if people wanted to get in touch with you, your website is kriyayogamidwest.com. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm happy to work with people one-on-one as well. If you wanted to get more into the physical side of the breath, or if you had questions, feel free to reach out.
All right. Thank you again for being here, Bryan. It was wonderful to see you.
Thank you. Awesome retreat.
Yeah. Let's see. So once again, if you want to join us, we've actually had a few people asking about the Himalayan Institute, June 18th through 20th, somewhere around there, the solstice retreat. We had 2 more signups this morning. Bryan will be there, Danelle will be there, Jasmine will be there, and we've got about a 3-day retreat planned at a wonderful retreat center. So if you'd like to join us, we'd love to see you there in person. In the meantime, it's 3:16, so we've got about 45 minutes. We'll come back and we will practice Qigong together with Jasmine. So we'll see you then. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Kriya Yoga Podcast. To learn more about Kriya Yoga meditation, you can visit us at kriyayogaonline.com, where you can find information about current book releases, online classes, and in-person retreats throughout the year. If you're interested in supporting this podcast, visit us at the Kriya Yoga Online Patreon community at patreon.com/Kriya Yoga.